After the success of the original Super Mario Bros. In North America, Nintendo was eager to capitalize off that success with a sequel which would release 9 months later, a game we now know as The Lost Levels. However, when the game was first submitted for localization, it was considered inappropriate for the American market, but Nintendo was still anxious to continue the series outside of Japan, so they decided to retool an existing game called Doki Doki Panic into the sequel that would suit international audiences. Unlike the prior two games we've covered thus far, I actually have a decent amount of familiarity with Super Mario Bros. 2. Growing up, I owned a Game Boy Advance version of the game, which is apparently a port of the version released in the Super Mario All-Stars collection, but for consistency's sake, I'll be sticking to the original NES version for this video. It doesn't take long to notice how different Super Mario Bros. 2 is compared to the first game. Instead of rescuing Princess Peach from Bowser in the Mushroom Kingdom, Mario must travel through the dream world of Subcon and defeat an evil frog named Wart. But he's not alone this time, as he's accompanied by his brother Luigi, Princess Peach, and Toad, all of whom are unique playable characters and can be selected at the start of every stage. This gives players the option to switch between characters frequently throughout the adventure. It's important to note that the game is beatable with every character, however there are times when the levels are designed to take advantage of certain characters' strengths. More on that later. The game features 20 levels across 7 worlds, but the individual levels are substantially longer and mechanically varied compared to the original Super Mario Bros. There's a newfound verticality to the levels, making progression not just about moving left to right, but also up and down. And because of this, there is greater use of the climbing ability, which was hardly used in the previous games. The overall level design feels a little more freeform. However, it is still very much a course-clear type of game where the player's only concern is reaching the end. Worlds are governed by unique visual themes such as deserts, clouds, or caves, and each introduces new assets to help each world stand out. One of my complaints with the first game was that it had too little visual variety to last across the game's duration, so it's nice to see a constant flow of new material throughout Super Mario Bros. 2. Unfortunately, the same can't be said about the soundtrack. Once again, you'll be listening to the same 2 to 3 music tracks for a majority of the game, and when a different track does play, it barely lasts long enough to be enjoyed. Another aspect I had my eye on going into this game was the movement system. Super Mario Bros. 2 dials back the speed and acceleration from the first game. However, there is still a considerable amount of follow-up momentum that can easily slide characters off platforms and into obstacles. The big new addition to every character's moveset is the ability to grab, carry, and throw various objects and enemies. This mechanic is heavily utilized and often required for level completion. Another universal addition is the ability to perform a much higher jump by crouching for a short time beforehand, which is great for reaching tall platforms. My only complaint with these inclusions is that both actions take just a little too long to activate, leaving the characters vulnerable to attack. Otherwise, the moves definitely get players to consider their positioning in relation to the game world, and thus make for decent platforming abilities. As stated earlier, each playable character has specific abilities which give them advantages over others in certain scenarios. Mario is a well-rounded character with no glaring weaknesses. Luigi jumps the highest but retains his slippery movement while airborne. Peach can hover for a short time, and Toad can pick up objects and enemies faster than anyone else. All of this is fantastic in concept, but in practice it presents issues once the rest of the game is factored in. Not only is it impossible to know which character is best suited for a level before entering, but it is also possible to choose a character that is severely disadvantaged and ill-equipped. This wouldn't be a problem if there were frequent opportunities to switch characters, but the only way to change characters is by getting a game over which sends you back to the start of a world, and too many game overs boots you all the way to the title screen. So while it is possible to complete the game with anyone, more often than not, the price for choosing the wrong character is frustration and death, which is something you can't afford given how much longer these stages are. I would like to say the experience improves when using the ideal character, but that's not entirely the case either. The character-specific advantages I mentioned mainly allow you to skip or trivialize certain sections, which isn't exactly a compliment to their design. Some sections are miserable no matter what, whether by oppressive enemies or by frustrating gimmicks like quicksand or ice. One of the biggest issues is that the screen doesn't scroll vertically when going up and down, so there are moments when the player can't properly react to obstacles off-screen, taking unfair damage. Super Mario Bros. 2 also introduces a lot of ideas that ruin the game's pace. The most recognizable instances are when you need to slowly dig through a bunch of dirt, but you also have sections requiring the use of bob-ombs to clear a path, and occasionally the game will force you into a guessing game to obtain items that aid your progression, such as these doors which need to be in the right places to access a mushroom, or this room full of jars where you need to go down a specific jar to find the key. At best, these moments are a minor pace breaker, and at worst, they are a total waste of time. I did occasionally encounter interesting moments that require some out-of-the-box thinking to progress. Things like building a set of blocks to access higher areas, or riding enemies across hazardous floors are cool ways to maneuver characters using elements built into the stage. I just wish that these and other ideas created a better sense of speed and forward momentum, because more often than not I felt punished for going as fast as possible, which is counterintuitive for a Mario game. Overall, Super Mario Bros. 2 is really inconsistent in terms of quality. I'm inclined to say that it's better than the Lost Levels, but this game frustrated me in a different way. It sacrifices some of the speed and simplicity that made the first two games easy to digest and fun to play, and introduces a slight tedium to the moment-to-moment experience which robs levels of any immediate satisfaction. Super Mario Bros. 2 certainly adds variety to the gameplay, but most of its contributions don't necessarily bolster the game as a platformer. I appreciate the visual diversity and the additions to the characters' movesets, but in my eyes, the game is once again brought down by its level design and the inability to access other characters midway through stages. Super Mario Bros. 2 is a serviceable continuation of what the original started, which is surprising considering it wasn't initially developed as a sequel. I didn't intend to be so critical, especially after the last video, but I can't say I had a particularly great time with this one either. Nevertheless, I am still excited for the two remaining games in the marathon, and I hope you'll continue to join me on this adventure. If my previous experience is anything to go by, then things will only get better from here.